Hi everyone, my name is Neetal Parekh. I'm the founder of Innovate Social. I'm an attorney and author and frequently speak on social enterprise aspects of business. So today we're going to actually do two things together. We're going to look at 5 things every founder should know about social enterprise. So if that framing or that word is not familiar, don't worry, we're going to go through that. And then we're also going to talk about how to pitch. And for some of our businesses, we may be pitching for funding, we may be pitching for co-founders, for partners, for employees. So pitching is such an important part of our business. So hopefully we get to work on that a little bit. And I've listened to hundreds of pitches. Some of the teams that I've coached have gone on to win tens of thousands of dollars in pitch competitions. So hopefully some of that can be helpful because so much of our journey as entrepreneurs is being able to tell our story and get people on board or to understand and appreciate what we do. So the first thing is 5 things every founder should know about social entrepreneurship. And I wanted to first start and share a little bit about me, so you know what you're getting into here. Let's see. Okay. So I've moved a lot growing up. My dad was a civil engineer. My family is from Mumbai. I was born in Oklahoma, have moved like 20 times before I was 20, mostly in the US, somewhat internationally, or have spent time in those places. And that really kind of impacted the thing I wanted to do. And I thought it would be it would have to do with international work. And so I went to law school, or before law school, I had a chance to volunteer abroad in India after a major earthquake had happened in Gujarat, a state in Western India where my family was originally from. So a lot of the girls in this image had been orphaned or partially orphaned, but I was so amazed at their sense of resilience and their passion for life and their curiosity, and it really created a sense for me that I want to create impact with my career as well and with the work that I do, that if I'm going to go into law school at this point, I had maybe just been accepted into law school, but not in law school, that I wanted it to be something that impact was part of my career. So that was an early thought in my mind. And in my first year of law school, I had a chance to study abroad in Geneva and Strasbourg and be at the United Nations and get to learn about some of the United Nations agencies and organizations. And I thought that might be an interesting and perfect connection between my moving as a child and my desire to create impact and my connection to law. But when I was there, I actually, as in going and meeting a lot of the UN agencies, I felt a sense of frustration, a level of frustration by the different folks of how long it takes for change to happen and how much consensus building you have to create. And it changed my view after that summer. I thought I'd be meeting all these people who are so passionate that were like, come be part of the UN. And I was like, maybe now I'm not exactly sure what I want to do with my law degree. But I finished 2 more years to kind of complete that. And then during that time, one of the classes we had to take was corporations class. And in that class, we really learned that there's like a 2-party system when it comes to companies in the United States. You're either for-profit or you're nonprofit. You're either completely dedicated to your mission and you have a legal structure that reflects that, or you're for-profit and you have to maximize shareholder wealth if you're public, and you could actually theoretically be sued by shareholders if you're not pursuing maximizing profit. So that creates a real tension where I feel like many of us, we fall in the middle. We want to do work that's aligned with our values, and maybe we want to start businesses in that. So I, after that, had a chance to move to the Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area, and really learned about the startup scene. It had never really been in a place that had such a thriving and vibrant startup scene. With everyone you talk to would be like, this is what I do in my day job, but this is what I'm working on the weekends. And it was very galvanizing and exciting. And through some of that, I learned about this movement. At that time, it was the benefit corporation movement, this movement for a new kind of business that was for profit, but also for impact. And I had been working at FindLaw, which is a Thomson Reuters company that I was on their first social media team, and I had never even written a blog post before working there. And then I was writing multiple blog posts a day about legal topics for non-legal or general audiences. And through some of that research, I learned about this B Corp or benefit corporation movement, and I thought it kind of solves the problem in another way. In law school, I had seen the problem as you only have for-profit and nonprofit, and at that time I thought, what if you gave shares to nonprofits, so it creates something that's the same? And here, this movement of benefit corporation expanded the idea from shareholders to stakeholders, and you think that the community environment are also stakeholders in your company or in the work that you're doing. So I thought this is kind of very exciting. And then just 3 years ago, on like this month, I had a chance to move to Tacoma. This is where I took my bar exam, and this place has always been special. It's been a place of yes. Any idea you have, I think you can find a community to make it happen. And so it's kind of been interesting to be part of the ecosystem that is growing, whereas in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, those ecosystems are kind of, for entrepreneurship, are mature in a different way, and it's been fun to be part of like seeing how we can support entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, which we'll get into. So yeah, and so for me, through my work at FindLaw, I started InnovateSocial.com first as a blog, looking at the legal structures that were emerging in California and other states and globally around social entrepreneurship. And then I felt like because there weren't a lot of resources at that time, and I was going up to Sacramento and to go to the hearings to learn how a new legal structure is passed. Really, not since LLCs, since the 1970s, has there been a new legal structure and for corporations. So that was very exciting. Through that, I wrote a book called 51 Questions on Social Entrepreneurship that looks at legal structures, business models, international social impact, measuring social impact. And I wrote this because I was having to go to different talks to learn about each of these aspects. But as founders, we're really deciding all of these at the same time. We're deciding our legal structure and our business models. They're not separate, they're together. And so this book is told as a story with characters, but it's also with these 51 questions. So you can use it to either flip to the part of the book that matters to you, like if you're looking at certifications for your business, or you can read it as the story. I was also talking to a lot of people at this time, so and I felt like their stories were not known. So I started a podcast called the Impact Podcast that has over 160 episodes and over 100,000 downloads. It's a little bit in hiatus now, but it's still available. There's attorneys, there's artists, there's people with retail businesses, all talking about how they've weaved social impact into their business. So that really started creating this understanding that we're not alone in trying to figure this out. Like, how do we incorporate impact, and what does that even mean? At this point, I had a lot of content, the blog posts and the podcast episodes and the book. But one thing as a founder is I don't know how that content is being received. I'm not with them looking over their shoulder when they're reading a blog post or when they're reading the book. And so then I created this event called Impactathon. So we've done now 30 of them across the country with over 900 participants. We do it in partnership with universities, companies, foundations, cities. And the idea is that it gets people together to learn about social entrepreneurship through having a few speakers, and then people actually form teams and work on their ideas, and then they give a pitch at the end. And so then they talk about what their business model is, what their impact model is. And then some of the universities that we worked with, they've gone on to, like, what comes out of this is you have a team and an idea and a pitch, a basic pitch. So then some of those students have gone on to participate in like venture, competitions, and some of them have won, and that's what I was mentioning, that some of them have won prize funds. So I always think that, really getting people in the room together and thinking through these ideas together kind of catalyzes some new insight. And now with AI and everything, we can actually get to things faster. We can build in different ways. So it's really exciting now. I feel like as we put this out there, I'm going to go to I don't know if you've heard of what vibe coding is. I'm going to go to a workshop next week. I'll definitely stay in touch and I'll tell you how it is. But it's basically how non-coders can code using AI and there's like agents that know engineering, like know the coding, but we can work with those agents to create things. So maybe for all of our companies, there's a simple app or a chatbot or something that's kind of automated that we can create without necessarily hiring a coding team. So it's an exciting time, I think, for businesses, but it's also a lot to sort through, for all of us without feeling overwhelmed. And then recently, actually since moving to Tacoma, I worked on an offering called the Good Pitch, which is on-demand pitch practice. And the problem this solved was when we do things like Impactathons, you have all of these teams that have worked on one pitch for this, and there's a lot of excitement. And then if that's on a weekend, on Monday, everyone kind of puts everything down, gets back into their real world, and kind of forgets about their pitch. So we thought, what if there was an on-demand platform where you could go on and make your pitch again with subject matter experts? So kind of have been developing that. And right now it's more of an add-on to an Impactathon. But through one session of an hour after an Impactathon, you could give your pitch, maybe a few weeks after Impactathon, you could give your pitch 4 times in a row to different, like one-on-one to different subject matter experts. And so for some people, they feel like in that 1 hour, their pitch improved exponentially because they had to give it over and over again, and to people who actually are asking questions and kind of giving them feedback. And then about a year and a half ago, I worked with another entrepreneur in Tacoma, and we offered a facilitation training called Emerge, a 6-week training to help people become better facilitators. And the problem that this was solving was that, especially after COVID, I think a lot of folks, I feel like, especially I work with a lot of students, there's a different anxiety about meeting in public places or even meeting in a group. And so I feel like when we empower ourselves, facilitators, we can help facilitate and bring really meaningful gatherings together. And I think if we've ever been to a really well-facilitated event, you feel so cared for, you feel so like guided. And so I feel like if we can make more of ourselves feel like we are that person in the room, we can kind of bring more conversations to light rather than making things so, divisive as we kind of are in that time. So that's just a little bit about me. And then recently, this has been one of the things when my nephews were young and I had this version of Impactathon, I wanted to create something for young learners to see themselves as problem solvers and really think of themselves as maybe future entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. So at that time, I was working on an event, an Impactathon for kids. And I was part of this leadership program to create that. And then it was 2020, and there was a pandemic, and even my nephews, and I'm sure a lot of the kids that we know, were on Zoom for hours, in the day. And so I thought, I don't think this should be an event on Zoom. So it turned into a children's book series, which I thought, this will be fun. I'll finish it in a year. And 4.5 years later, as the books finally came out. So as of from last June to December, all 4 books in the series called The Pineapple Friends have been released, and they introduce problem solving, social emotional learning, and kind of entrepreneurship principles like lean startup, design thinking to really young learners. And now we're starting to develop curriculum so we can take this into schools, and also that people can do this use like the lessons with their kids. So so that's just a little bit about me. And I always say that Innovate Social creates content and experiences to make social entrepreneurship more actionable, transformative, and accessible. And so we have the content side and we have the experiences side. And that's kind of, a little bit about what you're getting in this, who you're getting in this. And now, luckily, we had a chance to chat a little bit with the group before, but I have a sense that everyone in this room and then maybe on the video as well are working or in some stage working on their own business. And just like I kind of shared with you, maybe you can take a moment and reflect on the places, the experience, your learning journey, your career, passion, how that's impacted the thing that you're creating, that you're putting out in the world. And I think sometimes that part of our story is actually so powerful. And sometimes we feel like we have to kind of put that in the back and say the numbers and kind of, bring out the statistics. But sometimes if you know a little bit, if someone knows a little bit about your story, about the why, about what made, because what each of you in the room and on video endeavored to do is to create a business. That is like out of nothing, you're creating something off of a blank page. That's a huge lift. And so helping the people that connect with you know why you are this crazy, eccentric person to even want to do this, I think it actually might help people feel closer to you. So I just say that because, just think about that in your story as you share that as well. Okay, so now what are these things? What is social entrepreneurship? So I really like to look at social entrepreneurship and define it as using business models to create social impact. And the reason I like to frame it that way is that you can be a nonprofit social enterprise, but you're really looking at a replicable business model. Like there's something that you're doing that there's an exchange of revenue or grants or something, but that there's some part of it that is a business model. And so where maybe the distinction is there are some groups that are charities, like relief organizations that we 1,000% need in the world after natural disasters or after any humanitarian crises, but they may be on a charity model, where like a model where people fund them and then they go and provide those humanitarian relief efforts. And where I think that's a distinction with social enterprise is that we're looking at business models. Are we, and we'll get into some of those later, but are we selling a service or a product in exchange for, for the thing that we offer? Is there a model around it that can be replicable? And are we using that for the purpose of also creating impact in addition to creating profit or generating revenue? So some of the key concepts that you might come across in social enterprise is there's the idea of a double or triple bottom line. So usually when we talk about companies, when we say they have a bottom line, a single bottom line, that's usually profit or revenue, right? Like a company that has a strong bottom line, they're in the green. These are all words that we use to show that they are making money. When we talk about social enterprise, we expand that idea to a double or triple bottom line where we are not only trying to pursue the profit and the revenue, but we're also looking at environment and community. So that's usually the triple bottom line: profit, environment, and community. Another phrase you might hear is base of the pyramid. And so when we look at a base of the pyramid, that's considered the poorest of the poor in a region or country. And sometimes our social enterprises, the way that we are creating impact is we are providing solutions for the poorest of the poor. So what that means is that we have to think differently as founders, because you might have a great solution, but if it's very expensive, you will not be able to reach those people. So one of the examples that I have in the book is there's a great, if someone is no longer able to use their knees, that can actually mean that they don't have a livelihood if they're on a bicycle or in some other way, that's what their business is. So there are replacement and prosthetic knees that can be really effective, but they might cost $10,000, and that just may not be in the realm of possibility. So there was a design company that was involved in frugal innovation, they call it, basically designing for base of the pyramid. So their main impact is how do you create a version of that is $100 that could be now accessible. So there's a great amount of innovation there, but the innovation is not creating a new product. It's creating that in a way that is more affordable for the target audience that you're trying to reach. So for some of our companies or our work out there, maybe that's the impact that we're making, is that we are taking something that is already available, but we're making it ultra affordable. And that could be through the design, it could be through the materials, it could be through a subsidized model. There's a number of ways to create impact in that realm, but that's important to know, especially when we're working with groups, with kind of different groups around the US and internationally, where that might be the most impactful thing. So if we bring a solution that is just like way outside of the price range, we might be mistaken to think that our solution is not impactful. It's just not impactful in the way that the people, that it's needed to be impactful. So that might mean that we need to go back and think about it differently. B Corp and Benefit Corporation, I've talked a little bit about this, and we'll get this on the legal structure side. I'm just curious in the room, how many people have heard of B Corp? Okay, cool. Well, that's good. Oh, we have one. But you might notice on some of your products, oh, perfect, this water bottle. So you might have seen this. There's a B with a line under it. Many of your products might have that. And that means that they have the certification. And so for some of our companies, it may make sense to look at certifications like B Corp to show that we are impactful in that way. And so that way, once you know about that, you might look at if you're a consumer and you're at a store with two identical products and one has the B, you might say, okay, well, they're in the Benefit Corporation, they're in the B Corp movement, and I want to support that as a consumer. So I'm going to vote with my dollars, and I'm going to vote for that company. So similarly, for our own companies, if it makes sense, we may want to show that we are aligned with impact and that we want our consumers to know that. So that's another way. That's another concept, and there's also a new certification emerging in this arena called Purpose Pledge. So I just mentioned those so you can look them up later too. Another area for impact innovation is called last mile solutions. So you could have a great solution and it's affordably priced for your target market, but if it cannot get into the hands of your users, you may not create the impact that you want. So one kind of impact is this kind of impact. It may mean that you're not even creating the product or solution. You're just the one getting it to the hands of the person that needs it. So I like thinking about Coca-Cola actually in this, because if you've been to any small village or any place around the world, on their shelf, there's a Coca-Cola bottle. And you have to think, how did they probably used rail, sea, air, and maybe the last mile, maybe it came on a bicycle, like it was delivered, but they somehow got their product onto the shelves of the smallest distributor or the smallest retailer. So similarly for our companies, and when it comes, maybe that could be the impact that we're creating, is that we have a solution, but we are getting it to the people who really need it, And so I think another area where that is ripe for some of that is that we think about healthcare, triage solutions, all of that. If you're in an area where you're 100 miles away from a hospital, and you need medical attention, are there better solutions that can get those to you faster and better? And so Amazon is another great last mile solution. In fact, they have become so good at that they have their own fleet of vans. They're not even depending now on the mail services. So I've just put that out there because in this room I got to hear from there's product and there's services, and so we are each delivering our products in a different way. And so that might be something, a place to create impact is by providing last mile solutions. And then one other term that I want you to be aware of in social enterprise is in the US, at least, you don't need to prove you're a social enterprise. It's a term of art. It's not like anyone can call themselves a social entrepreneur. And so I think we have to be, as consumers, we have to be critical thinkers and to really kind of demand or ask critically of those companies that use the B, that use these words. What is the impact that they're creating, so they're not greenwashing or just using a marketing or media term to align with the movement without actually creating any impact. And similarly, as founders, if we want to align ourselves with impact, we should find a way to make that clear. And so some companies create impact reports that show these are the number of, these are the number of people impacted by our work. Maybe if you have a certain business model where there's a certain amount that you're giving for free, who are you supporting? And some of this, maybe if we're getting any grants, we may have to report that anyway. But just that's something that is kind of an enemy, or it challenges us because we don't want to greenwash this, because then otherwise, if we really are trying to create impact, people will kind of just think, oh, they're just using it as marketing, and we want to really show the impact that we're making. So those are, there's a lot more resources now on social enterprise than there were when I started a lot of this. So you can find more podcasts, more books, more resources. So I wanted to give you some examples of actual social entrepreneurs and social enterprises. So it takes this idea from the abstract to the actual. So this is a local homegrown Tacoma company that is doing amazing work in social enterprise. I don't know how many people have heard of Aquaga. We have a couple of people. They're just based in Traction Space, which is right on Market, where I work from too, so I get to see them a lot. But they are basically have developed hardware or developed machines that filter out PFAS. Those are forever chemicals, microplastics, from wastewater. And so they have built this machine, and they're also a benefit corporation, which it'll make more sense later. But they take a waste material, they run it through their system, and then they have harmless byproducts, essentially water and some other things. But they take this extremely toxic sludge and make it into something that is no longer toxic. And so that is a huge impact that they're making. And then they're also aligned with the social entrepreneurship movement. So that is one kind of social enterprise. And I love social enterprises that use waste material as their raw material and then create something. So there's also interesting social enterprises that use algae or that use different things and create products out of them. I'm lately been really fascinated by, we know software as a service, but I've been really fascinated by this idea of packaging as a product, because a lot of our packaging is plastic, and now we're learning that plastic leaches into the things that it contains. So now there's some really innovative work happening around more biomass materials that can become packaging. So even for us as entrepreneurs, we can either support those companies by choosing materials that are packaged in something other than non-biodegradable plastic, or we may create some solutions in that space too. So that is one company. There are some companies that expand access and accessibility. So this was a company that was part of an Impactathon called Wheel the World, and they basically took this idea of and said that, hey, there's a lot of tourism groups out there, but not many of them, if any of them, are designed for people with different accessibility needs. And so that means, and I think it may have come from maybe someone in a family, like they were going to make a family trip and they had to ask, and they wouldn't be able to accommodate someone who had was in a wheelchair or had some other accessibility issues. So they've come up with this whole thing of like the whole company of how can you make travel more accessible and like make accessibility part of it at the beginning, not an afterthought afterwards. And then that creates impact because people can see the world, they can experience it, they can be treated in another with a different level of dignity in traveling. And so I think that's a huge kind of social impact that they're creating. Similarly, in the accessibility space, one of the speakers at one of the Impactathons is Infinite Flow Dance Company. And they basically have a dance company that invites and welcomes people of all accessibility to perform and go to classes and teach. And they've Marissa, the founder, has been in documentaries, and they've been on Hollywood stages, and so now they have this troupe of people that have different accessibility and that they can perform and everything. So again, this impact is accessibility. That's the way that these companies are creating impact, by expanding accessibility, and so that's something that maybe in our companies or our stores and services and offerings we can offer as well. Another kind of social enterprise may be to uplift regions. So Actionable was a company that was in an Impactathon, and they basically have a work on poverty alleviation through tourism and upskilling. So a lot of tourism can actually be counter beneficial to those local economies and local, the individuals that work in those industries. So they were kind of changing that and actually empowering the local communities that provide services, and they would become part of the tourism community versus being separate from that. So in a lot of big cities where we see a lot of tourism, if you look a little closer, there's a lot of some of the people that are working in those industries don't have an equitable wage and aren't necessarily treated well, and so tourism as an industry can be looked at with a different lens, and so they were kind of starting some of that. Another kind of social enterprise can be to expand access through technology. So All EBT was part of an Impactathon and then spoke at another one, and they basically were finding different ways to take food stamps online. The founder is ex-Google, maybe maybe Facebook, also grew up on food stamps, and so he said that he wanted to create a different level of dignity and access to being able to use food stamps and to be able to use it for anything online. So maybe you'd be able to have healthier options because you broaden your options when you're able to access online. So that was one way of creating impact through access and technology. So that might be something. And there's a whole technology for good movement as well that you can be part of. So those are just three, and there's impact, again, is really defined by us. So we can define impact, but it's the idea that the purpose of our company, as our companies grow, the impact also grows, and so it's not separate from our company. And that's, people kind of ask me, how do you know if it's a social enterprise? And I always kind of think, is the impact kind of on par, are the goals for impact on par with the goals for profit? So back when I was starting a lot of this, Uber and Lyft were just starting to really become popular. And so people were kind of thinking, at that time they were marketing themselves by saying, oh, we are reducing the number of drivers on the road, and that could be considered an impact. But their goal was never, it was a byproduct. It wasn't like their impact was number one or number two to their, to their goals. So I wouldn't maybe consider them a social enterprise. I think they are creating a lot of impact, and a lot of companies that are for-profit can create a ton of impact through their supply chains. But it doesn't mean that they are like a social enterprise, that's one of their main goals. So I just kind of make that distinction. And so now, so now you know what social enterprise is, or at least hopefully a little bit more than when we walked in the door. Now the next thing we want to look at is what are business models for social entrepreneurship. And this is a great next thing because we're in like a room virtually and physically of founders who you have to think about your business model all the time. So there are ways to create business models that also optimize or include impact. So we'll go through some. And I always like to say that business models are a hypothesis. So we can always change them, as we get more information. So these are not set in stone, and you may have a version of this that is your very own. So have you guys heard of Tom's Shoes? Yeah, so Tom's Shoes has been around for a while, and they became popular because from day one, they had a one-for-one model. For every pair of shoes you buy, they give a pair of shoes away. That has been problematic over time for different reasons. One is that some of the folks in the shoe repair, cobbling industries in those areas where they were giving shoes away, their work was disrupted because it's very hard to charge for something when someone is just giving a free version of that out. And also, the other big thing on the social enterprise side is it didn't necessarily look to solve the issue of why people didn't have shoes in the first place. It just kind of, by giving shoes, it didn't really look at the root problem. But I appreciate that they started because they kind of created this new version of this company where with every transaction, they were making very clear to their investors, to their buyers, to their suppliers, what their impact was. So I always love that, even as we think about our business models, that how we can have something that is so clear where the impact is not, it's not like, kind of fuzzy. It's like very clear that in every transaction we can have that. They've changed this now, so it's not a one-for-one model. What they do is they have, for every shoe purchased or pair of shoes purchased, they give a percentage of it to local industries and local nonprofits that are working on that issue. So I feel like also they got the feedback. It was a hypothesis for them as they had more data. They said maybe giving a pair of shoes away is not the best way we can create the impact we want, and so they adjusted. And so similarly for us, I think we shouldn't be afraid of the negative. If there's an implication that we didn't expect, we just be very upfront with our consumers and say, this is the impact that we're making, and if we get more information, we will shift and we can create impact in another way. Salesforce, as if you've heard of it, that's a SaaS company, a software as a service, is not a social enterprise, but from day one, they've had a 1-1-1 model. 1% of their product, 1% of their employees' time, and 1% of their revenue goes to social impact causes. And what I like about this is, again, it's a very clear accounting. So when their team of accountants is looking at all their transactions, they know exactly what is going towards social impact. So if we are social impact companies, we could choose a version of this. We can do a different percentage. We can, we can think about different places where that goes. But it means that every transaction has an impact, a goal, or has an impact. And so I think that's also a great story and a great. There's a clarity in that to be able to share with all of the stakeholders in our companies, including our board and all of our, consumers. If we have a physical store, we can say, hey, 1% of your purchase today goes to these causes, or, or something like that. So that is another business model that you can have. One of my favorites, and I think one that we all actually engage in all the time, is called the freemium model. So if any of us have an app that we've downloaded for free, but there's a version of it once we open it that we can pay a little bit to maybe not have ads or not to have, some, to access another level of the app, that's a freemium model. So and the story, the Aravind Eye Care is a great example. In the 1970s, an ophthalmologist came to the United States for his first time, and he went to a McDonald's, and he was extremely impressed by McDonald's because he said, any McDonald's I go to, I get the same quality of burger. It comes to me within a few moments of ordering it, and it's very consistent. I mean, now we know that has all kinds of negative implications, but he went back and said, how do I apply this level of efficiency to eye care? And so he had a family of ophthalmologists. They rearranged their whole eye clinic to make it more, they looked at efficiency and productivity. How can we get people through the system, through their eye appointments in the fastest way, the most effective, and in a way that to bring down costs. And so then they had a model where it was freemium. They would never turn away a person for an eye surgery. They've done millions of eye surgeries, upwards of 4 million. And they offer a premium service. So if you want in your own room to recover, you pay more, and that subsidizes the cost for someone who's getting it for free. The other thing is they ended up doing so many millions of eye surgeries. So like if I need an eye surgery, I would rather go to a place that's done millions than someone who's done a few hundred or something, right? So they became a teaching institution where doctors from all over the world would come and take tours of their facility, and that would be another revenue source for them too as well. So even for our companies, and I feel like this is kind of the model that I have, because if you are listening to a podcast or reading a blog post about, you don't have to pay a thing, you're getting some information, but if you want something more, you might buy a book. If you want something more, you may do an impactathon or a workshop. But I feel like for me, it's really important that you have access to the information. And so that I think is a way that we kind of create social impact with our work as well. And so even for yours, there might be something where there's a freemium model. Maybe if we have a physical location, maybe there's some amount of time that's like not a happy hour, but that's like a community hour that someone can come in and have a hot meal or have something that they wouldn't maybe be able to get. Maybe there is some kind of premium, really high level offering that you can offer that then subsidizes some of that as well. So I think that's another thing. Another company to really look at in Patagonia has been at front and center for social enterprise. In fact, when I would go to the hearings in Sacramento, they were there too because they wanted to be the very first company to become a benefit corporation in California. So they've been, and their founder and CEO is, founder now because he's retired, but is really fascinating. He's if you ever hear him, he's like, I never wanted to have a for-profit company. It just became so massive. But because of that, they created a whole structure that has never been done before. When he stepped away as the CEO, he put 100% of the voting stock into a trust, and 100% of the non-voting stock went to the nonprofit. So there's no part of this, he didn't want his company to no longer stand for the reason that he founded it. So this structure has never, it's really not common. It's never been done. So this just mentions that you can work with your finance team, your lawyers. You can craft something that's never been done before that matches the impact and the goals that you want to make. So so these are just some of the business models. So with legal structures, we talked a little bit about this, and I want to go over this fairly quickly so we don't dive in too much and get lost in the weeds. But basically, benefit corporation, when you say the whole word out, benefit corporation, that's the legal structure. Every state had to pass its own version of it. So it's not like there's one version. There's every state has its own version. The garden variety one, it looks at 3 different aspects. That does the company make a positive impact on society and the environment? Does it focus on stakeholders versus shareholders? And do they use a third party to measure the impact? So it's not just our companies saying that we're creating impact, that there's a third party that is kind of talking about that. And then the B Corp, when you don't say that, when you just use just the letter B, that means the certification. So it's very confusing because people use those interchangeably, but when you just say B Corp, that's a certification, and that any company can get depending on their size. They would pay a different amount. This has come under some criticism recently that it's they are also the certifying body, so they're that third-party certifier. So they're also the one that gives the certification, so that can create this weird relationship, And so some companies have stepped away. Some are kind of being part of reimagining what the assessment is. But just be aware of that. But it has been around since 2006, and there are many companies around the world that have that. There are other legal structures. In Washington, there's the Social Purpose Corporation. So that's very unique to Washington. So it's good to know that you can incorporate as to be a company that prioritizes impact as well. And then you can mix and match. So there's like many different ways to connect cooperatives. Some people think are worker-owned companies. A lot of them, they've been around for used in agriculture, but many people feel like that's the most equitable form when every person that's an employee also owns a part of that company. If you're growing in a certain way like a startup and you might have external funders, your funders may not want to deal with your 105 different owners of your company, so you may have to choose if that's the right model for you. But I'm happy to chat more about this, and there's also more in the book if you want to dive deeper into that. So yeah, there's over 8,000 B Corps around the world. They have some different rules that if you become a publicly traded company, when you certify, they want you to reincorporate as a benefit corporation, as a legal structure. And there's a few different kinds of things, but it is a growing movement, and there is more research around this now. So we are starting, even if we think about new certifications or think about making this more equitable and more impactful, we're not starting at zero now. We have a lot of data points to make it work better. And I think that's always our goal, is just to make things work better and reduce friction. So, so these are all the states that are in yellow that have passed some form of social enterprise legal structure or have B Corps. And then the ones, I don't think there are many legal structures outside of the US. I think Canada has one. And then some countries like Korea, you have to actually register with the government to show that you're a social enterprise. But there are B Corps all around the world. And so the last thing I would want you to know about is what are the funding options available for these companies that are pursuing impact and profit? So there is a whole area, we've heard of venture capital, right? If we're going, there is impact investing, which is like a tiny part of the bigger venture capital side, but it is this idea that that our investors are also asking us about our social impact, and we are also reporting on that. And so where that can be useful is if it's going to take some time for us to show our impact in our investment. Some of the impact investors understand that, and maybe the return on investment has a longer horizon, to be able to achieve both. It's hard enough having a for-profit business these days, and you add impact, it doesn't make it easier. It might make it a little bit more complex. So there's that. There is crowdfunding for donation, like Kickstarter and Indiegogo and some of those. And where that can be impactful is you can appeal directly to your end user, and you can tell them the story of impact, and that might be why they care about you. Plus, if you get the funding that you ask for, you might be able to take that to show that to an investor or an impact investor and say, hey, look, we started this idea, we got 500% funding. There's something in this. Maybe you should take another look at what we're doing. So that can help you build a stronger argument for going for more traditional kinds of funding. I will just mention out of this, another one I will mention is social impact bonds are actually not a bond. It's just a contractual, three-party contractual agreement, but it's usually some kind of a contract between a nonprofit, like a consulting firm, and a government organization. And I'm going to give you this example and then think about how it might work for the solution that you're creating. But recidivism is when someone returns to jail after being released. So everyone usually is aligned to lower recidivism, and I'm always stuttering on that word. So you know what I'm talking about. So at one point they tried this very novel solution to this. They said there was a big consulting company that was trying to address this from a consulting basis. So they were large, they were very profitable, and they were trying to address this issue with the government. There was a nonprofit that had a solution that was working really well, and they were really effective at lowering recidivism. And then there was the government. The federal government also had this goal of reducing this. So instead of being at odds, these three groups came together and said, okay, the consulting firm said, what if we front the money and we pay for this nonprofit to scale their efforts? And if we achieve the goals, government, that you're setting, then you have to pay us our fee. So we only win if we all win. And ultimately, the impact is the greatest thing. I think with this case, I don't think they reached the level of impact they needed to be recompensated by the government. So there is some risk involved in this, because then maybe they may have been out. Someone had to front those funds, right? But I say this as an example because even for our work, there might be some creative ways to bring public and private partnerships together that actually puts us all in the win-win-win situation. So just look for that. And a lot of these are just agreements, they're contracts, they're relationships. So you can think about that too. Let's see. This is a video about B Corp. Let's see if it works.
We have a dream that one day all companies will compete not only to be the best in the world, but the best for the world. Others share this dream and have begun to turn the dream into a community. This community signed a Declaration of Interdependence and invited others to join them. Now thousands of companies from 60 countries are turning our community into a global movement to redefine success in business. B corporations use the power of business to solve social and environmental problems. Our largest certified B Corp works to inspire a healthier world through food. A food service company that serves over 1 million meals to low-income public school students every week. A manufacturer that goes green and helps workers move from welfare to a career. An online bookseller that recycled used books and funds local libraries and global literacy. An outdoor apparel company that stewards the environment. An ice cream company that maintains its mission post-sale. B Corp is a certification that helps consumers identify these change makers, and investors make money and make a difference. As a community, we are passing laws around the world, creating a new kind of company that serves society and shareholders. We are leading a global movement of people using business as a force for good. Join us. Be the change.
That is from B Corp, so you get an idea of what they are. And then the last thing I want to leave you with is, how do we measure? So we're creating all this impact. We have a business model. We are thinking about impactful funding. But then, how do we know that we're actually making the impact that we want to make? So I wanted to introduce you to the Sustainable Development Goals. If you're not already familiar with them, they are 17 goals defined by the United Nations of goals they wanted the world to achieve by 2030. We will not make it there, but the goals are continuing. No poverty, zero hunger, and there's actually a great video that overviews this. But in our companies, we can always list on our website, or if you just look up UN Sustainable Goals, you can see there's a lot of research for each of these as well. We can research the different goals that apply to the work we're doing, and we can align ourselves with those goals and mention it in our work, in our media, to our clients, and then it kind of connects us with this larger movement. And so you'll hear a little bit more about this too.
Did you know that the UN Sustainable Development Goals are a universal call to action that unites 193 countries around the world? If these global goals are fulfilled by 2030, life on Earth will be better for everyone. So, what are these goals? Eliminate poverty in all its forms. No hunger. Everyone should have safe, nutritious, and sufficient food. Everyone has equal access to healthcare, thus ensuring our well-being and a healthy life. Equal access to a quality education. Ensure gender equality where women and girls have the same opportunities as men and boys. By achieving these goals, each member of our society will be equal, safe, and happy. UN global goals also include access to safe drinking water and sanitation, access to clean energy that is safe for people and the environment, sustainable and stable economic growth. Everyone has a decent job, strong infrastructure, and the support of innovations. Lower inequality within and among countries. cities and settlements be developed without damaging the environment and people. Achieving these goals will result in the well-being of people and our planet. We can further take care of our environment with the following goals: sustainable and safe production and consumption of products. Take urgent measures to reduce climate change and its impact. Ensure the sustainable use and protection of ocean and sea resources. Restore and protect Earth's ecosystems. By achieving these goals, we will form a society where strong institutions ensure peace and justice. It is important for everyone to be involved and to build partnerships for achieving sustainable development goals. You are part of this process. Demand the implementation of these goals. Take the lead and share information with your friends.
Okay, so now you know 5 things about social entrepreneurship, but the one big thing is you're not alone. This is a lot of information, and it's also really complex to try to build a business that is also trying to, create social impact. So there are. This is actually the homepage of our website as well, so you can see it more clearly if you go. But there are articles, there are resources to learn about investment, there are podcasts and books and learning institutions and events and gatherings. There's lots of ways to be in community with other people who are trying to figure this out too. And so definitely don't feel overwhelmed or feel like you're alone. And that's what we're here for as well. So if there is something you want to learn more about and I can be helpful, please reach out as you're trying to think about social impact and your company. And what I wanted to just do also is I wanted to tie all of these things together. So let's see, how would you actually use these 5 things that we learned? So I actually might start with thinking about what you're passionate about, your why of why you got into your business. Then look at the sustainable development goals and see if there are some that align with that why. If you were like, I never saw women entrepreneurs in my family and I wanted to be that person, then there's education for girls and equality for girls. That might be something that you're focused on. From there, you might look at your business model. Now that you have a cause that you're really passionate about, is there a way that your business model can support that with every transaction even? And then I would look at almost your legal structure last. Now that you know this is the impact and this is then what kinds of funding do you need? Or look at your funding next. What kind of funding do you want to pursue your business and this impact? Is there special funding available just for that cause? The nice thing about being aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is you can look up your goal and find others funding that, supporting it, that are in that, and that might help you find a way to get funding. And then I would look at your legal structure and say, now that I know all about this, does it make sense to be a for-profit, a nonprofit? Does it make sense to get the certification or be a benefit corporation? So I would kind of start first with your why and then focus on your impact and then build your business model, your funding model, and then your legal structure, if that makes sense. Okay, we're just going to jump into it. I love this idea of pitching this, and so I hope at the end of this we feel comfortable with the idea of what pitches are, and that we're always pitching, and that we pitch more and more. There's ABP, always be pitching. So I hope that we can jump right in. So pitching why, it's something. Why have a workshop on this? We already pitch. It's really just a succinct way to communicate our ideas. And what a pitch is different from like a presentation or like a statement is that we're asking for something. And it doesn't always have to be funding. In fact, I would say most of the time we're not pitching for funding. We're pitching, but we're asking for something. We're asking for buy-in in some way. And so that is really what that is what makes a pitch a unique way of storytelling than other areas of storytelling. And it's how startups or companies, how we get funding, how we find our co-founders, our partners, how we get our customers. And the other thing is that it's a mechanism by which we can get feedback. And so that's why our pitches are not usually 30 minutes or an hour long. They're short because we want someone to hear it and give us feedback. So now we want to know what is it? So I always say it's an art and a science. The art of it is just being able to explain what it is, but the science of it, especially coming from Silicon Valley, is that there are a certain number of things that will be in your pitch deck. And a deck is just really the slides. And when I first moved to the Bay Area, everyone would be like, oh, send me your deck. And I'd be like, what the heck are they asking for? But it's just really your slides. It could be your PDF, your PowerPoint, your Canva, whatever it is, but your slides that have this kind of recipe of things in them. And it kind of gives your audience a way to really look at your business and impact in a quick way. So once in a while, if I have a meeting with someone who's kind of that mentor, advisor, investor level, even though I'm meeting with them, I'll just pull out my deck and we'll just walk through it because it's just the easiest way for them to understand and give feedback. And then, and you can use it for online meetings and with investors. You might be on a stage in pitching, but really especially if you're doing it in a more intimate setting, you probably want to customize that pitch deck for that particular person. That, especially if they're an investor, you've researched their portfolio, you know what they're looking for. If you go to Shark Tank, how many people watch Shark Tank? Yeah, so you often notice that they either choose the sample or something that kind of matches those sharks. Or they say, oh, we know you've invested in a company like this, so you do your research as well. So I'm just going to go through what they call like the 10-slide deck, kind of what is usually in it. The first slide is usually the startup name, a one-line description, maybe the names of a few team members. The second explains what the problem is that you're trying to solve. The third, if you've done that well, shows that your solution is solving that problem in an amazing way and gets people excited. The fourth is usually and these can go in a different order, but the next one is what we call the minimum viable product, the MVP. What is the simplest version of a solution that you've created that is now available or that you're getting feedback on in your pitch? What is the research you've done for this? What is the existing feedback? If you're in a pitch competition, this is the most important thing because we can all sit in a room and write out a bunch of things, but if you want to show that you've gone out and tested this. You've tested that the problem really is a problem, that the solution that you're working on really is a solution, and that there's some research to back it up. So I would want to see survey results, that you've created a survey, gotten that out there, you have some video testimonials. You really want to they kind of call it get out of the building. Then on one side, it shows your team and kind of why each person in your team is well positioned to make your team successful. So it's not just for the sake that say, oh, I met Mary in college. Investors don't care. They want to say Mary is the best finance person out there. There's not anyone like her, and that's why she's an asset to our team and makes our team stronger for it. You want to have a slide that makes an ask. So what are you asking for? And early stages, there's a little adage that they say, when you want money, ask for advice. When you want advice, ask for money. So sometimes when you're meeting with an investor, you should maybe just ask them for their advice. They will happily wax poetic about their advice, and maybe they'll excite themselves about your idea and decide to fund you or support you in some way. The key with pitching is that we want to tell a story. So these slides should not feel like disconnected parts. They should kind of flow into it. They should have transitions. And so this is where sharing our why and our passion might be a really powerful way to start, because then we're kind of bringing them right into why this matters to you and why it should matter to them as an investor or an audience member or potential team member. We want to show what you've built. Like, you want to say, look at this is what I've created to solve this problem, to address this thing that I really care about and that you should care about too. We want to show and share feedback and kind of prove that there's an interest. If you're talking to an investor, they want you to show them that this matters to a lot of people. Not everyone's an investor, but if you are going to venture capital, they don't want to know that you're solving this for the 5 people that you know in your town. They want to know that this will serve 5 million people over the time, because that's what they're betting on, is that there's going to be a return on that investment. So depending on who you're pitching to, you want to show the market size to be equivalent for what they're expecting. You want to be prepared for what you don't know. So this is where, before you pitch to that perfect person that you think will, meet all of your needs for funding or whatever, you want to practice with a bunch of other people so that perfect person, that perfect venture capitalist doesn't ask you a question that you have no idea or that you have never thought about, and that kind of throws you off your game or makes you feel like they think you're not prepared. So you want to get some of that feedback early. And the biggest thing is practice, especially for the events that we do with the Impactathon. By the time we get to the pitch, it's like a 4-minute pitch and a 4-minute Q&A, which means if you have the juiciest, most important things on the last slide, but you only make it to the first 3 slides, there's a chance that like you didn't get to something that was really important. So this is where practice and timing, especially if you're going on a pitch competition, is really important, because you also want your audience, including the judges, to feel like you're not rushing through. Like, you calmly got through the first 3 slides and then you speed raced through that. That's very stressful to listen to. So practicing for that. And also for technology, I will tell you that your slides, everything works every single time, but except for the time that you're in front of an audience. So the show has to go on. You have to be ready to speak without your slides. I actually had a chance to speak at South by Southwest. If you guys have heard of that, it was a big deal. I was selected. And of course, I went on and my slides didn't work. And we were only there for that time. And so I just and then in the middle of the session, they worked. But I was like, and I was just laughing because this is what I tell people in Impactathon. And it happened, and they're such a well-oiled machine there. They have so many. But, at the end of the day, it didn't matter that they have like 10 tech people, they didn't work for me. So I wanted to show you this example that we can chat about briefly.
In Lancaster, women are paid 56% less than men. In India, 328 million women do not have stable employment. The problem is self-evident. But what is the solution? I came face to face with these statistics during my time in India and in my daily life in Lancaster County, and I thought, what could I do about it? I spent 4 years teaching children in the poorest areas of India, as well as pursuing my passion in the local fashion industry. Eventually, after many lessons learned from everyone around me, I set out to merge my 2 passions, fashion in India and women in Lancaster. I am Timbrel Adidala, and I am the founder and owner of Lush Bazaar. I believe in female empowerment through cooperation. Lush Bazaar is a socially conscious fashion line with clothing and accessories handmade by women in India and distributed by women in Lancaster. The clothing blends cosmopolitan styles with rustic material for an urban chic look. With your help, we can expand production in India and purchase a truck to create a mobile fashion boutique. Funds will also be used to provide thriving wage jobs for local women in Lancaster County. With help from you, we can bring fashion that empowers and inspires to people all over the country. Our goal at Lush Bazaar is to show the world the power of women working together.
So yeah, that was simple. And that was less than maybe 2 minutes, right? But it gave us an idea. Of course, with the power of video, it got us there faster. But that this could be as simple as the kind of pitch that you could make for your business too. It doesn't have to be. She didn't even have slides, right? So it doesn't have to be a 10-slide deck. That's just kind of one format. But yeah, the pitches are actually quite simple, and a lot of things can kind of be in that category. Now, as we go through these next things, you can think about that example and see. Almost put your investor side on and say, what would you have wanted? Actually, we can even ask, let's say you're an investor and you're seeing this pitch and potentially to invest in it. What's one question you would ask her after that video? So this is great. In 1 second, we went from assessing that she made a pitch to having questions that we would want answered, right? So even for your pitches, after you get done doing it, if you can switch your mind and imagine, you can record your own pitch and then imagine yourself as the investor, what are the questions that you have? Because if we had these questions for her, there's a chance that the person that she's pitching to has these questions as well. So sometimes we get so tied up in our pitch and saying everything that we forget that they're just another person that's going to give us feedback, So if we can switch that lens, it can help us a lot. Or ask someone that we trust and care about to give us that other lens. Pretend you're the investor here. Kids are great at this, by the way, because they'll just be like, yeah, but how do you make money? Like they're not trying to be nice, they're just trying to understand. Kids are great to give you feedback on pitches. So now if we were to break down those 10 slides into a little bit more detail, we would say your startup name and one-line description. And I like having a one-line description because sometimes it's so obvious to us, but you just help them get there faster. Like, just say, this is what we do, this is how we do it in one simple line. And also, if you're in a pitching competition, that just helps because you're not the only pitch that they're listening. We're part of maybe 15 pitches. When they go into the deliberation room, we want it to be really easy for them to remember who we are and what we did. To that end, I would also add a logo to each of your slides, your logo, so that by the time they get to midway in the pitch and they're like, oh, this is kind of interesting, they haven't forgotten what your name was. You've just made it easy for them. So just make, with your pitching and especially in events and things, just make it very easy for someone to connect with you, to remember who you are, and to reach you. What is the problem you're solving? A way that you can frame that is, why is this a problem? Like looking at a root cause, and then who is facing this problem? So for hers, she said women in India, right? Like, so she gave us a geographic boundary and she gave us a specific group and maybe artists, right? Or artisans, right? So even for yours, if you can make the universe smaller and more specific, sometimes we want to say, we often think we want to say we're serving everyone, everything all the time. We never say no. We want our business to be that open, but really that doesn't help anyone to know how they can support you. So it's better to put some guardrails on that. Be specific about a region, about a group. And then, and how many people face this problem? So this is where having even one powerful statistic can help align everyone. 78 million people are facing this every day, or whatever that is for your industry. Then we want to talk about your solution. If you've done a good job of setting this up, your solution, your company is the hero that is solving this problem that is now on the minds of everybody in that room, including the judges. So you want to talk about how your social enterprise addresses that problem, that root cause. Why is this the best solution? So maybe you can say, there's a few solutions out there, but they're not addressing all of these things at the same time. Like when I was talking about my book, I said there were other resources out there, but I wasn't finding ones that talked about all of these things at the same time, and so I created one. So similarly, how is your solution, your store, your company, your product, your service solving all of those different things? And then this is something that's interesting, but I feel like it can be very powerful for social enterprises. What is the cost of doing nothing? If we did nothing today, in a year, we would have 70 trillion more tons of waste in landfills, whatever that is to your industry. But what is the cost of doing nothing? This creates a sense of urgency. And often for investors, especially VC, they are looking for the trend that can grow, and they're looking for first movers, right? The people that have realized that trend first and are acting on it, and you want to align yourself with that. Like you're doing something, and if you don't do something, it's just going to be harder. Who is on your team? We talked about this a little bit. Why is this the best group of individuals? A new thing that I'm seeing people do, probably not that new, but it's because this is often where you want to spend the least time if you're timed on a pitch. So if you just have the logos of companies they've worked with or schools they've gone to, then in that one slide with a snapshot, you're building credibility without having to go and say all of the words, So if they worked at Apple, they worked at Amazon, they worked at whatever, they've gone to UW, just put some logos near their name and then maybe give them a title. So I think it can be helpful to say, Chief of Finance, or even if your group is only 3 or 4 people, but you're kind of saying this is the cone in which they work and this is their kind of credibility. That can save you time, which is very precious if it's a timed pitch. Then you want to talk about, why is your solution important right now? So Steve Blank is this like mentor in Silicon Valley, and he's really fun to listen to if you find any videos about him, but he'll be like, your job as a founder is you want the investors to be like kind of salivating, like foaming at the mouth because you've created this sense of urgency, and they won't let you leave the room until they get your number or they talk to you. Like you want to create that like edge of your seat urgency. So that's something like by saying like, hey, like the AI, we're seeing that with AI, right? Like no one wants to be left behind. No investor wants to be left behind in the AI train. So similarly, in your industry, maybe the thing you're doing is either very timely because the technology is exactly right. Maybe you've found a solution that is exactly right for the goals of a city, and they're very aligned and they want to support that. Something about your solution that makes it an urgent and important solution for right now can be very helpful when pitching. Because what you don't want an investor to say is, oh, that's really interesting, get back to me in a year. That's like a nice way of saying, like, I don't know, we don't care, and good luck to you. So you want to do the opposite of that. You want to show them that there's a reason that this matters right now. And then the size of the market for your solution. So you really want to, especially if it's an investor, you want to talk about the market opportunity and how that is actually really large and growing. Even if it's not large, if you can show some trends that this is a growing market. So LOHAS is lifestyles of health and sustainability. It's like a market category that is massively growing. And for many social enterprises, their solutions are reaching that market, right? So if we can say, hey, more and more people care about the B Corp certification. They care about this. They care about whether there's microplastics in their foods and service in their things that they buy. And we are mindful of that from start. And that's why we are, we're actually a good solution and we fit that growing market trend. And growth potential. What is the competition of your solution? So why would you want to put your competition on your slide deck? Yeah, you want to show how you are different. And at a base level, you want to show them that you know your industry and you know that there are competitors. So if someone walks in and is saying, oh yeah, we're creating a search engine, it's never been done, and you're like, what about Google and all the other search engines? So you're also building credibility that you know your field and you know your industry. And then you're also showing how the existing solutions out there aren't, you're meeting them in a new, innovative, unique, or better, faster, cheaper way, whatever your value proposition is. And then you want to show them what you built and what the feedback has been. My tip is, it's always, if you're building anything tech or AI related, or even something simple, there's a real excitement about doing it live. Let's pull it up live. But remember, if it's going to break one time, it's going to be here. So I would say maybe use a GIF or GIF, so that you are showing the screens that are going, but without the worry of it not working. So be very careful. In law, we often say never ask an expert something that you don't know what they're going to say the answer to. So never put something on your slide that you don't know if it'll work or not, because that can be stressful. And something that was really amazing, it may actually become a weakness. Like now they might be like, oh well, it didn't work here. So just be aware of that. And did you get out of the building, quote unquote, to test your solution? So this is where survey results, video testimonials, those things can be really helpful. Then we get into what is your business model. We looked at some of the business models now, and you can explain what it is, how your company will get initial funding or will build revenue. What is the replicable part of our business because an investor wants to know that you're growing over time. So what is the part that rinse and repeat, and just scale that up, You want to talk about the costs, which we didn't hear in her pitch, but yeah, the cost of the solution. What is the cost of goods sold? What is what your retail is? What is the differential? Is that growing? Is that maybe why you're asking for investment? So you can get a larger lot of products or services so they could bring that cost down. How much will you charge users? Is this a subscription-based service? And then how will you measure social impact? So are you looking at the Sustainable Development Goals or some other way that you're going to measure social impact? And then what are you asking for? So if funding, how much and how will you use it? If it's mentorship, which I think is a great thing to ask for, what do you need mentorship with? And is your ask clear and simple? Oftentimes at an Impactathon, I often just say maybe even ask, because you were getting feedback, so ask for people that can give you feedback, because that's even at an Impactathon, if a judge can do something simple, they often will say yes. So we've had judges who maybe a team didn't win, but they went on to mentor those founders. So if you make if you go in and if you ask for $10 million, it's so easy to say no and walk away. But if you say, you know what, we've talked to 15 people that have this issue, but we would really love to talk to another 30. So if you happen to know a parent group or a community group, like that is something where someone will be like, oh yeah, I'm on the board of this organization, let me connect you, So think about the ask you want to make. And I would say go for the ask that is askable. Everyone knows that everyone needs money as founders. That's the easy thing to ask for. But sometimes that's not really what you need from that person that you're asking. And there's something else you could ask for that will be much more likely to get a response. My overall tips from this are know your audience again, so know who your judges are. If you probably don't want to give the same pitch to investors as you do to a potential retail partner. Those are different audiences. They're looking for different things. So think about your pitch deck as being customizable, that you just copy and then customize that next version. It's an art and a science. So I would say once you have those slides down, try saying them in a different order. Try sometimes with your story first or last. If your team is really strong, what if you start with your team? Or what if you put that in the middle? You might have to try a few iterations to see what really fits the flow of the story that you're trying to tell, and the images that really work well to bring people in and also to kind of make your story memorable. Especially if you're doing a pitch competition, one of your jobs as a founder is to make your pitch memorable, because by the end, they really will forget everything. Like by the time they go in and are talking about the last 8 to 10 pitches they saw. So you want to make that easy for them to remember. Be ready for interruptions, tech failures. Once in a while, a lot of pitch competitions are like, here's the amount of time to pitch, and then here's the amount of time for Q&A. Once in a while, especially if they're investors, they will interrupt your time during your pitch, and that will throw your flow off because they didn't wait, they wanted to ask a question. So if that happens, you just kind of gather yourself, take a moment, and then just kind of get back into your slides. And what I always like to do is have an appendix. So if you've been practicing your pitch and you can but there are these extra slides, but you just won't get them done in 5 minutes, have them in the appendix. So when the investor or the judge asks this question, you can just say, oh yeah, and then you just get to scroll to your appendix slide, but you only bring it up if they have the question. I feel like we're getting ready for a pitch competition now. I love this stuff. So build a strong narrative and just find the best way to convey that to, through your slides. The other big thing is feedback. So once in a while, you'll see, because you've been working so hard on your pitches, you so believe in your idea that and especially investors are trained to go after your weakness. They're kind of like hunting, birds of prey. That's what their training is. So sometimes they ask a question and it will totally flatten you out. It'll feel like they're just ridiculing everything. It will feel so personal. And so sometimes what happens is, as founders, you will hear people get defensive. And what I would just invite you to do is not get defensive. Just say, oh, that's an interesting question. If you don't exactly know, say, I'd love to research it and get back to you, or just kind of answer it, because sometimes that's what they're trained to do. And so we just have to not take it personally. Once we go up there, take nothing personally, And then one more thing is, if you're running out of time, and so let's say you're giving your pitch, now you're not going to make it to your last slide. Rather than trying to speed race to the last, I would just, once time is called, say, thank you so much, I'm happy to answer any questions. And usually if they know you didn't finish your slides, some judge might just be like, oh, why don't you, and they'll give you some of their time as judges to say, why don't you finish why don't you just finish that thought or something. But I think it's better them saying it than the organizer kind of pulling you off, and it creates this kind of stressful situation. Those are some things. There are pitch events all the time, and I would recommend I just went to something in Seattle called Founders Live, which was really cool. It's a 99-second pitch. So I would encourage us, because the one huge thing that happens when we have to pitch is we work on our pitch, right? If you know you have to pitch, your pitch will get better. So I would say whenever you can, if there's a pitch event, I know UW often has one that's available to anyone, just sign up. And it's okay if it doesn't go great, because if your pitch for your business got a little 10% better, you've already won. And then if through that you meet other people, other judges. So really, sometimes we kind of feel like, oh, I'm not there yet, I'm just going to wait to pitch. But I would say do it the opposite. Use that as a way to get better on your pitch, and kind of get out there and meet more people. And some people at some events, I love going to hackathons, other people's hackathons too. There are people that literally just go around the world and win hackathons, and they use that fund, because if they're coders and stuff, then they use the funds that they won and they go to another hackathon. So you can also win some good money for your startup and your business. So if SCORE has a pitch event that has significant funding, but I'm sure there are ones through City of Tacoma, but really look for those and just know that it'll just get better over time. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. It was such a pleasure to be with you all. And please stay in touch. If I can be helpful in your social enterprise journey in any way, I'm passionate about this, and I know that I want each of you to be super successful. And if I can be part of any of that, please reach out to me. So thanks so much.